They raped him, they tortured him, they beat him, then they killed him.
Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom had their whole lives ahead of them until the night of January 6, 2007. What began as a simple carjacking quickly escalated into something so depraved, we don't find the words for it. The depths of human cruelty knows no bounds, as this case tragically shows. It takes a special kind of evil to not only steal an innocent life, but to do so in such a prolonged, merciless manner, inflicting unimaginable suffering. And for what? The senseless motive behind this brutality only adds to the heartbreak. Channon and Christopher's story is one that will haunt Knoxville for generations, a painful reminder of the monsters that can lurk in our midst, but it is also a testament to the power of love, justice, and resilience in the face of unfathomable loss. Channon was just 21, Chris only 23. They were the couple that everyone low-key envied, the kind of love you dream of finding someday. They'd only met a few months ago, but they already knew that this was something real, something different. And they had no doubts that they would make this relationship work long-term, too. They were made for each other. Channon was crushing her senior year at the University of Tennessee, studying sociology and ready to change the world.
She was a typical girl. I mean, she wasn't perfect. Nobody's perfect, but she was... never gave us any trouble, always did well in school. She was beautiful, but what made her even more beautiful was the fact that she was not stuck on herself.
Chris was that loyal friend and gifted carpenter everyone in Knoxville knew and loved. He was hardworking and kind beyond his immediate family. Everyone who knew him remembered how he always gave it his all to put a smile on everyone's faces.
Anybody that knew Chris was his friend, and he had a smile that everybody just loved.
Chris was an excellent baseball player. Good boy, good kid, worked hard, had a lot of skills. Could have went on and played further if he'd have chose to.
January 6, 2007 was supposed to be a night of good food and celebrating with friends.
12:35, the phone rang that night, and he spoke to her on the phone. She called to check in, to let us know that she was coming home rather than staying at Kara's that night.
Chris scooped Channon from her girl's apartment, and when she slid in the passenger seat, they shared that kind of hug that gives you butterflies, all passion and promise. That pure moment, a snapshot of young love, was the last flicker of light in their short lives.
I sat up and she never came home.
They had no clue a crew of armed monsters was clocking Channon's forerunner, plotting on a carjacking to fuel their drug hustle. The group was led by LaMarcus Davidson, fresh out of prison for jacking cars. Davidson, his pal Levital Cobbins, and their boys George Thomas and Eric Boyd rolled up on the couple at gunpoint, forcing them into the back seat. Tied up and terrified beyond words, Channon and Chris were dragged to Davidson's rental on Chipman Street. The nightmare was just beginning. I can't even put into words the hell Channon and Chris went through in the next 24 hours. Tortured, beaten, essayed, and worse by Davidson, Cobbins, Thomas, Boyd, and even Davidson's girlfriend, Vanessa Coleman. Monsters. All of them. Chris was bound, gagged, violated, and led barefoot to the railroad tracks. Shot over and over, one final bullet to the head, execution style. Gasoline poured on his broken body before the match hit. Meanwhile, back at that house of horrors, Channon was going through even more prolonged, brutal violence. We're talking vicious SA with objects, caustic chemicals dumped on her ravaged body.
They raped him, they tortured him, they beat him, then they killed him. It's not a normal murder.
Somehow, through impossible strength, she clung to life for over 24 hours of non-stop torture. But in the end, they hogtied her, stuffed her in multiple trash bags, and tossed her in a garbage bin to suffocate. Layers of plastic away from fresh air and any shot at survival. Channon died a slow death, grasping for air and struggling to comprehend what just happened and why. It's an unimaginably painful thought that someone could die like this young couple did, in physical and emotional torment, unable to understand why a complete stranger would do this to them. When Shannon and Chris were no-shows at the birthday party Saturday night and still radio silent on Sunday, their families knew in their guts something was very wrong.
We had not seen him since Saturday night, which that's not unusual. He was 23 years old, and he kind of came and went, you know, with not a whole lot of restrictions at that age. And the way we discovered he was missing was Shannon's mother, Dina, called and said that Shannon didn't show up for work.
This couple was never the type to cancel plans or leave their people hanging and stressing. Shannon's mom called the police that Sunday to report her girl missing. Sadly, because Shannon was over 18, she got hit with that all too typical line, gotta wait 48 hours before reporting her. But these families weren't about to just sit around twiddling their thumbs. They got together and decided to conduct the search themselves if the police weren't going to help. They rang up the couple's friends and combed every block in Knoxville, all the while ringing Chris and Shannon over and over again. There was no answer though. Finally, Shannon's cell company came through with a lead, a ping off a tower on Cherry Street, a sketchy neighborhood miles from where they were last seen. Around 2 a.m. Monday, the search crew found Shannon's car abandoned, but the couple was nowhere in sight. The 4Runner was picked clean of anything tying it to Shannon, stickers, personal belongings, everything was gone. And the front seats were shoved way back. No way Shannon's petite self could have been behind the wheel. A pack of smokes was in the console, but Shannon and Chris never smoked. The scene was as suspicious as it gets. But the same day, someone was going to discover a much more sinister scene. On Monday, a railroad worker stumbled on Chris's charred remains. Those piercing blue eyes, even through the flames, confirmed it was him. The family's deepest fears came true. Chris was gone for good, and Shannon was still out there, missing. But before Shannon was found, the forensic team had to break it to Chris's family. He had died screaming for hours, enduring things that I can't even fully describe here.
Detective Snodderly says it's Chris. And we asked, well, how do you know? And he says, I recognized him by his eyes. Everything fell apart at that moment.
All of his friends walked in. There must have been 15 or 20 of them come in all at the same time, and that just gave me such an eerie feeling. So I thought, why isn't Chris with them? And it really put chills through me. I thought, you know, here's all his friends and he's not here. And that was one of the hardest moments.
Evidence from Shannon's car eventually led the cops right to a specific spot, that cursed Chipman Street house. On Tuesday, a SWAT team burst in with a search warrant. It was the stuff of nightmares. More of the couple's stuff was scattered everywhere, but it wasn't their possessions that scared the officers at the scene. There was an image that will haunt them forever. Shannon's body crammed in a kitchen garbage can. Her eyes, once sparkling with life, frozen open, painting a picture of the hell that she went through. She fought through unimaginable pain and suffering, only to fade away slow, suffocating in a plastic coffin.
Do you know how quick to Shannon and Chris that carjacking went down? Boom. You come down your stairs and you go get in the car and you are cranking your car and your boyfriend gets inside the door there, gonna get him a little sugar. Boom! There's a gun in the back of your head and some big sucker gets in your 4Runner and puts a gun on you just like that. It's done.
Semen and fingerprints tied 5 suspects to this nightmare. LaMarcus Davidson, Letta Cobbins, George Thomas, Eric Boyd, and Vanessa Coleman. Davidson and Boyd were arrested within hours, while the other 3, Thomas, Cobbins, and Coleman, got caught soon after. Within a week of the tragedy, the detectives put the story together. Davidson was the mastermind, and taking Shannon's car for his drug game was the motive. But how does a jacking turn into hours of torture and cold-blooded murder? That's a why that's never fully been answered. From all angles, none of these monsters had any prior beef with Shannon or Chris. Just a young couple, wrong place, worst time imaginable. 2 promising lives snuffed out by pure evil and the senseless cruelty of strangers. When word got out about what went down with Shannon and Chris, the whole city of Knoxville was shaken to its core. Folks couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that this nightmare jumped off just blocks or streets away from where they lay their heads at night. It was a hard slap of reality, the gut-wrenching realization that this kind of stranger danger was lurking right under their noses the whole time. The illusion of safety in their own community was straight up shattered.
I think a lot of people don't believe that things like that can happen here to them, and when they realize that, you know, there's monsters among us, they're coming in here, they want some protection. They want to know what to do to keep that from happening to them or their kids.
Whenever we get a chance, we haven't had the chance yet, but we're going to go and get gun permits and carry a gun also. I just feel like, you know, you really need one now for security, and especially if there's a home invasion or something, you really need to be able to protect yourself now.
We started a class just for women called Women on Target, and it's full almost every month.
Most of the people that I know have a carry permit.
But they didn't used to.
They didn't then. Do now.
This case was shocking from many points of view. This was not the usual petty crime you hear about in busy towns.
This case is unique for a number of reasons. It is unusual to have two victims. It is unusual to have a stranger crime in the sense that the victims and the defendants did not know each other. The level of violence is not as unusual, but a bit unusual. For the length of time that violence was carried out. It's unusual in how it's gripped the community's attention, and I think part of that is because you have two kids who are from fairly well-to-do families, who were not doing anything wrong. People look at this case and they think that could be me or that could be my kids, and so it touches people in that way.
The what ifs and if onlys hit hard too. What if someone had peeped the carjacking going down and stepped in? What if folks in the area had clocked suspicious activity at that Chipman Street pad and raised the alarm?
We were 2 blocks from where she was. If they'd have just knocked on the door, walked the streets, we don't know if we could have saved her life, but she wouldn't have sat there for 2 days in a trash can.
The whole community was caught in a loop, playing out scenarios where maybe, just maybe, they could have saved Shannon and Chris from the hell they endured. That guilt, even though it wasn't rational, it settled heavy on the city's soul. Knoxville was left wondering how they'd let 2 of their own down so damn bad, and how they'd keep the rest of their people safe from the monsters walking among them.
I'm more cautious about what I do and where I go and my surroundings. I'm very scared of going out somewhere that I'm not aware of where I am.
Since it happened, you always gotta be leery of everywhere you go anyway. So, you gotta be leery about people you meet and stuff that you do.
I have a daughter, and I wouldn't want as a result of that whole thing, I'm checking up on her every day.
The suspects tried to play the blame game, acting like their hands were barely dirty. But the receipts don't lie. There was so much DNA evidence at the scene, it was almost funny these people tried saying they weren't there. It goes to show what kinds of people they are, though, the kind that right after their arrest tried blaming others and refused taking any responsibility for their cruel actions. When the detectives dug through their past, they discovered that all 5 of them had been in and out of the jail system, always defying authorities and harming others for their own pleasure.
They've always had a life of crime. They were always unstable, and they were always into something.
2009 and 2010 saw Davidson, Cobbins, Thomas, and Coleman convicted in separate trials. Davidson received the death penalty. Cobbins and Thomas were sentenced to life in prison without parole.
I do believe firmly, and some of the people that I run along with, that when you practice a lot of deceit and when you're involved in a lot of things like that, it's gonna catch up with you. And I think it caught up with them.
Coleman serving a 53-year sentence. Boyd almost got away with just accessory after the fact. But after they dug deeper and ran it back in new trials, he caught life plus 90 years for getting his hand filthy with the kidnapping, SA, and murder too. Some fools tried to spin this as a race thing, like Shannon and Chris being white and their killers being black made it go down how it did. But the law stayed firm. This was a crime of opportunity, not hate.
I have heard that there's been some people that have talked about how it was a racially motivated crime, and I think that it's a bad thing because that just creates more racism and intolerance and I guess strife in the community.
Soon this tragic story became a political conflict, with people claiming the media coverage was skewed in favor of the black suspects.
I don't believe that it had a negative effect on the African American community as a whole, because the African American community is not responsible for the acts of a few individuals who went past the bounds of human decency.
Still, the national spotlight and outrage was on the savage brutality of the crimes, not the skin color of who did what.
I don't think it had anything to do with race. I think it was just that's who they saw and they went after him.
For the families, the unimaginable agony of losing Shannon and Chris in such a way will never go away. That pain doesn't fade with time or seeing people get locked up. At Coleman's parole hearing in 2020, Shannon's father said, "Someone many years ago made a statement that time heals all wounds. I'm here to testify today that statement is false. For the person that made that statement originally, never buried a child." Their moms can't help but remember over and over again how these two were young, kind, caring, and in love. They were both just so full of life, love, and promise. They didn't deserve an ounce of this. To keep Shannon and Chris's memory alive, their families set up scholarship funds and an annual memorial golf tourney. The Chipman Street House of Horrors was replaced with a memorial for Shannon and Chris. The families, though, through unthinkable grief, have been front and center at every parole hearing and court date, making sure their baby's killers stay locked up and the focus stays on the two beautiful lives that were snatched away. Shannon and Chris's story, it's an unimaginable tragedy, but it's also a testament to a love that endures. Even though their time together was cut short in the most horrific way, they packed more love, laughter, and realness into their short-lived romance than some folks do in a lifetime. As Shannon's mom, Dina, put it, we hugged them, we kissed them, and we told them we loved them. We were fortunate we did that because it was the last time we'd ever get to do it. Year after year, the Knoxville community comes together to keep Shannon and Chris's memory alive. They hold vigils where they light candles, share stories, and lean on each other for strength. It's a ritual of love and remembrance. A way to keep the focus on the light Shannon and Chris brought into the world instead of the darkness that took them out of it. These gatherings are more than just a tribute, though. They're a rallying cry, a powerful reminder that in this strange, unpredictable world, we've all got to have each other's backs. The message is clear. Look out for your neighbors, your friends, even the strangers on the street.
I have never done anything like this before. Everybody has someone in their family that dies, but they don't die like these families' children did.
Be the help someone might need, the lifeline they're desperately hoping for. In a world where evil can lurk around any corner, these vigils are a beacon of hope, a promise that together we can choose love over pain and light over darkness.
My heart just felt for them. We don't know what it's like, what they're going through, and anything that we can do.
Shannon and Chris's legacy lives on through this unbreakable bond of community, a love that will always outshine the hate.
We've got a whole bunch of cards from people that don't know us, that just have to say something and want to say something, that they're praying for us, and there's been an awful lot of support that we really appreciate. It really helps us get through.
May the memory of Shannon and Chris live on. Not for the way they were taken out, but for the way they lived. Hearts wide open, futures bright, and mad love to give. We can honor them by holding our people extra close and looking out for each other in this crazy world. In the end, as Shannon's dad said, we've seen the worst of the worst, but we've also seen the best.
I'd be sitting in that chair, and she would come, I bet 1,000 times, and slide right over the arm of that chair and sit in my lap, put her arm around me, and look at me a certain way, Daddy. And I would get this feeling that would come over me like, this is gonna cost me. if I sit down in that chair and shut my eyes, I can feel her do it, and it sure feels good. We can't bring her back.
Just always remember to tell your children that you love them, your family that you love them, because you never know when it's going to be the last time that you get to say those words. I was grateful enough to tell her that I loved her the day she walked out that door. And her daddy got to tell her he loved her that night he talked to her. Because that was one thing that we always did. We let our kids know how much we love them. And to be careful. You just never know when it's the last time.
May Shannon and Chris's love forever remind us of the good in this world, the kind of good that no evil can ever put out. Hey, thanks for watching. This is a really tragic case. Leave a thoughtful comment and let me know how you keep your loved ones safe in this strange world. Stay safe and make sure you like and subscribe before you go. See you soon.